the really hip thing was to be shooting heroin. My first dope, the first time I shot some dope was in Chitley Hall. You know, and a lot of the cats who were doing it were cats who were from New York. And they had bought it on campus. And so I started shooting heroin. I started shooting heroin, man, in 1968. And I didn't even stop until 1978. I did a 10-year bid with that. I realized this until later, that the actual intent of this heroin epidemic was to destroy the black consciousness movement. I don't want to say the black power movement, because it did that too, but it destroyed the black consciousness movement. It was around that time when people started having afros and started talking about being proud of being black and getting into black history, getting into African American history and this sort of thing. Not a lot of people were doing that, but it was a sizable amount of people who were into this blackness all of a sudden. I never did participate in the marches. You know, I never really thought it was a good idea. Even though my grandfather was a minister, he was involved in the civil rights marches. I did participate in one march in downtown Wilmington, and what happened was, I was marching in front of this one guy, and we passed by a pool hall, and one of the pool hall guys, well, they were standing there watching us march by. Well, one of the pool hall guys spit on a guy in front of me. He just spit on him. And so I said to myself, well, this is my last march, because we were supposed to just keep on moving. So I only did that one time. But I didn't participate in that civil rights movement, per se. When 1965, when Malcolm was killed, my man was Malcolm. I like Malcolm and Stokely and H. Rap Brown and those kind of guys, because they were talking my kind of talk, what I wanted to hear.
What is your kind of talk?
Well, I think an eye for an eye. You know, I believe in the Old Testament, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. We never had that. I never had that problem, because I said I lived in an all African American neighborhood growing up. Brother, in 1965, my grandfather picked me up from school. And mind you, my brother and I had transferred to what was known as the all-white school at the time, New Hanover High School. We went to Williston one year, and we transferred to New Hanover High School. My grandfather was bringing me home. At that point, my parents moved out to the suburbs. We had been living in the inner city, I guess you could call it that, and they moved out to the suburbs. So my grandfather was taking me to my parents' home, taking me home. So he had the radio on, and the news bulletin flashed on the radio. And it said Malcolm X had been assassinated. I'll never forget it. I bust out crying, screaming, and I said, oh, they killed him, they killed him, they killed him. I don't know who they were, but because Malcolm was really speaking on it, brother. I mean, Malcolm was speaking on it. He was raw. You know, he wasn't pulling any punches at all. So Malcolm was my main man. And around that time, I think I bought the autobiography of Malcolm X. So because I think that book was out before he passed, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, my grandfather looked at me as if I had lost my mind. He said, boy, you need to shut up, be quiet. He said, you know them white folks was going to kill him anyway. He was talking too much junk. So I just kept crying. I said, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know, you just don't know, you just don't know. Malcolm was my man. I was crying and bawling, 15 years old, man. You know, so when I finally got home, and my family took me home, I jumped out of the car and ran upstairs and started crying. But I overheard my grandfather say, my grandfather's a minister now. He was heavily in the civil rights movement. He was a part of the NAACP in New Hanover County in Wilmington. So he told my parents, he said, that boy crazy, that boy crazy. And so I put my head out, got off the bed, opened the door and said, I'm crazy for Malcolm. And I went back inside and started crying. But I'll never forget that. That happened in 1965. So I really wasn't into the civil rights movement.
Gotcha.
You know, I was into what was called the Black Power movement, you know.